Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we are going over my top 5 must-grind ships. These are ships that I would highly recommend you guys grind out if you have not done so already. It's a question I get asked quite a lot, like, hey, I'm looking for a destroyer to grind, looking for a battleship, a cruiser, or whatever. What should I grind out? And these would be amongst my, well, obviously my 5 most recommended ships. I would highly recommend you guys grind out if you have not done so already, or if you're looking for like a new destroyer, cruiser, or battleship line to go through. I would definitely recommend the ones that these guys belong to. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get on into it, starting out with number 5, which is the Tier 8 American battleship, mainline battleship, the North Carolina. The North Carolina is a ship that is probably one of the most, let's say, rewarding or relieving ships to get to once you get to it. Why? Because, well, especially for us older players, the Colorado was a bit of a slog. And by a bit of a slog, I mean an absolute pain. You're stuck in a dreadnought-style battleship when pretty much every single other tech line in the game is getting access to fast battleships. You're still stuck there at 20 knots. It's a chunky target. It's a big target. It's super easy to farm down. And it's just not an enjoyable time. But the North Carolina, oh boy, when you get to that thing, it feels like, man, everything in the world's just going to be all right. The North Carolina is, well, the first fast battleship that the U.S. Navy constructed in real life, and, well, in the game it is the first fast battleship for the American tech line as well. So, you know, historical accuracy there. You can still see the North Carolina today up in Wilmington, North Carolina, which we did over the Christmas breaks. If you haven't seen that video yet, check it out here. Link will be somewhere up here. It'll pop up for you. But yeah, really cool seeing the ship in real life. We got to walk all around her and stuff. It was doubly cool when I sat down to record this video, and I'm playing the ship. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the 3D model. I'm like, yeah, I walked around there between the two smoke funnels, and I went into the bridge and stuff. Really cool thing. But anyway, the ship in game is also very good as well. You are armed with 9 American 16-inch guns. Now, the one relieving thing about the Colorado is that she did have 16-inch guns at Tier 7, which are massive by Tier 7 standards. You have a lot that you can overmatch at that tier, including the standard battleship armor. Now, when you get up to Tier 8, 16-inch guns are still quite large, and there's still a fair amount you can overmatch, but the battleship armor threshold at that tier is usually 32 unless you are playing a battle cruiser line. But still, when it comes to cruisers and aircraft carriers and the like, you can, for the most part, zip right on through that. And you do have the American Mark 8 Super Heavy AP shell, which is a wonderful ammo type. It essentially is a super heavy, as in the name, super heavy shell. So the shell's heavier, it pins a lot more. You get all the goodies that come with that and a higher AP alpha than other 16-inch guns at that tier. So the guns are very nice. And of course, you do have the 2.1 Sigma and the American Dispersion Ellipse, which gives you good, consistent dispersion. The big downfall is that the North Carolina does have the 45 caliber gun, not the 50 caliber gun that the Iowa gets. So her shells are pretty much like walking to the target and not even like speed walking. They take their time getting there because, you know, heavy shell, short barrel means shell slow, right? So you do have to get very good at leading the target with the North Carolina. However, when you do get that down, thanks to the dispersion ellipse and the high sigma, the shells are fairly consistent, especially by Tier 8 battleship standards. So there you go. The ship herself, too, she is a treaty battleship. That's another thing we got to see on the real life North Carolina. Inside, it's very compact because you got to meet the treaty limitations. So, you know, the ship can only weigh so much, which leads to the armor being not fantastic on the North Carolina in real life and in game. So it's a ship you definitely don't want to show broadside to anything in. This ship definitely teaches you how to angle and angle properly. So an easy tip for you new North Carolina players out there: forget you have a third turret. just use the front two, and if you can get the third one in action, cool. If not, don't try to get it into action, because you are going to get citadeled by the enemy battleship. So yeah. Now, she does get the improved heal. That was added some time ago, so even though, yeah, you might you lose like half of your health, you can regen a decent amount of it back in most cases. It's not a super heal like the Conqueror, but it is the American improved heal. You get the American damage con on top of that too, so that nice 20-second damage con runtime where no fires or flames will get started on your ship. But the North Carolina, it's a ship that after seeing her in real life, I've come back and played quite a bit, and she's just a really solid tier 8 ship, and one I would highly recommend you guys grind up to just for her alone, not even talking about the rest of the line. So going down to number 4, we have the tier 10 French destroyer, the Kleber. Look, fellas, there's a reason this thing gets banned or limited in every single clan battles that's been going on for the past, what, like 3 seasons it's been at tier 10, and Kleber and the Marseille, they either right off the bat or just eventually get banned or limited very quickly. This ship is just good, fellas. If you like open water gunboats, which is the more exciting type of destroyer play, it's definitely a ship you need to grind up to. And that's the destroyers that I have played, like the Khabarovsk and the Kleber and the Marceau. Those are the ones that, you know, it's more engaging. You're not trying to sneak around. You're just letting your guns blaze, and you are, you know, finding those enemy ships and basically being the annoying mosquito in their ear, and eventually they will stop looking at your team, and they'll look at you and try to deal damage to you. And by doing so, what you're doing when playing the Kleber on these open water gunboats is that you're taking the attention away from your team, and now the enemy team, they're trying to shoot you, but you're in this fast, zippy little French destroyer that they're going to have a hard time hitting thanks to your engine boost and your, well, just high speed and maneuverability. What I like to do in the Kleber, and what the Kleber is very good at, is just some good old throttle juking. You know, you pop a speed boost and you're going full blast forward, then you hurry up and, you know, throw it in reverse, and your ship stops, so starts going in reverse pretty quick because of the engine boost and because, well, it's just a fast ship. That's, of course, throws the enemy shells off. Then you crank it up to like half speed, let it sit there for a couple of seconds, and either throw it back in reverse or throw it in full ahead. You're just confusing the enemy team, and the Kleber is very good at that because of her acceleration and high speed. On top of that too, the Kleber still has a 16-kilometer main battery gun range, and the shells and the ballistics for the shells are still comfortable enough to where you can very much do damage at that range quite well. I'm sure many of you have been on the receiving end of a Kleber from like 15 and 16 kilometers away. It's annoying as hell, and well, that's what it's meant to be. Now, she does have a longer reload time for her main battery guns as a trade-off for this, but you do have what I like to call the I win button, which is her reload booster. Now, her guns by themselves are pretty darn good, but when you pop this reload booster, you get, I mean, just a terrifying level of DPM when this reload booster is going. So while you might be in a bit of a spot, let's say if you come up against like a 4 Sherman or something with your base reload, when you pop that reload booster, now you're just going to probably nuke most of that guy's health with the burst you are going to be getting out of your main guns with that reload booster active. And yeah, you win the engagement, hence why it's called the I win button. It's also great for like if you do start a fire on an enemy ship and they use damage con, well, damage con stops running, hit the reload booster, easily set 3 fires on them just like that. So it's an all-around annoying as hell ship. The torpedoes are actually pretty decent on it as well. I almost forgot to mention those. They do have an 8-kilometer range. And what makes it an excellent ship is, of course, the French damage saturation model. TLDR, the ship takes less damage than it should. It gets saturated faster and therefore takes less damage from enemy shells than it really should when compared to other destroyers. If you don't know how damage saturation works, let's say, you know, you hit in the bow with a torpedo. There's only so many HP points in the bow, and once those HP points are gone, that section of the ship is damage saturated, which means you can only get so much damage out of it. Let's say the first hit with the torpedo does the full 10,000 damage. Well, that might have been all the HP in that portion of the ships. Now the next torpedo may only do 2,000 damage, and you can apply that to shells too. That's a very brief description of how it works, but that's how the Kleber is so tough. But yes, a ship that's always useful and competitive, useful in brawls, useful in ranked, and one I highly, highly, highly recommend you guys grind out. And going down to number 3, we have another baguette, which is the Tier 10 French battle cruiser, the Marseille. Now, the Marseille, very confusingly similarly named to the Marceau, is a battle cruiser. It's basically an overgrown Dunkirk, right? And this line, when it was released, was quite terrifying to play against. They're still very strong today, which is saying a decent bit, because a lot of tech lines, I mean, how many times does a tech line get released and then it's either kind of like, yeah, it's aight, it's okay, like the Pan American cruisers. And then this line comes out, and it's still a pretty solid set of ships to this day. And the Marseille is still very, very good in my humble opinion. So yeah, basically an overgrown Dunkirk line. They are battle cruisers that are, interestingly enough, in the cruiser slot. The battle cruiser lines we've had so far, like the French and the Germans, they are in their own battleship line, and then the Japanese battle cruisers are in the battleship line as well, but the French get slotted into the cruiser slot. I'm guessing because the guns are, small battleship guns, very large cruiser guns, if you will. But anyway, yeah, so the Marseille, she's fast, she's agile, she's very much a ship that you will get in trouble with if you kind of just, go W full tilt at the beginning of the match, because they are that fast. Now, to the ship's credit, I can get in trouble with the Marseille because of her speed, but at the same time too, I can get out of trouble because of her speed as well with that engine boost. What these ships are very good at is, well, what the French large ships are typically good at. You find a flank, you find a hole in that flank, and you run down it as fast as you can. You get the broadsides of the enemy ships, and you dump your 9 battlecruiser guns into the side of the ship. But you do also have a reload booster as well, like with the Kleber. So you get 3 salvos into whatever ship wasn't paying attention to you with that excellent French AP. The French AP is a high velocity AP, which means despite having smaller-ish caliber guns, like how the Alsace, the Bourgogne, for example, have 15-inch guns, because of the high velocity of the shell, they can, punch through a lot of armor, unlike other 15-inch guns at their tier, and, well, do some pretty darn good damage. Apply that to the Marseille's 310mm guns, and yep, you've got some guns that really hit like battleship guns, especially when you have the broadside of enemy ships. So even though you might be going up against a battleship or a well-armored target, your guns are going to have no problems putting a smack on them. Now, are you going to delete battleships in one salvo? No, obviously not. But with, 3 rounds of 9 305mm guns, that's going to hurt quite a bit. I don't care who you are. And on top of that, like I said, the speed boost of the ship is pretty darn fast. She is maneuverable as well. This is not a ship, despite the turret layout, with all the turrets being forward of the superstructure, where you sit there and go bow onto the enemy team and try to tank. It's not going to work out well for you. The armor is nowhere near thick enough for that. She has a battleship burn time as well when it comes to the HE. You don't do that. Use your maneuverability, use your speed to your advantage. Keep on the move. Run down flanks when you have the opportunity to. When not, run around at around mid-range and just be an annoying little ship for the enemy team that they have to try and deal with. So again, a ship that I have a ton of fun in, and one I would highly recommend you guys grind out there with the Marseille. Going down to number 2, we have the Tier 10 Japanese battleship, the Bungo. Now, the Bungo, if you guys have watched my video where I talked about the Japanese battlecruiser line as a whole, the line is not that great, but the Bungo herself is very much worth the grind. So the Bungo has 10 457mm guns. So 10 18-inch guns, but not the 18-inch like the Yami has. They can overmatch 32mm of armor, unfortunately. But 10 18-inch guns, 10 457s, that's a lot. That's a lot of firepower to deal with. And she has a 26-second reload on those 10 18-inch guns if you take the reload module. So, yeah. That's a lot going down range. And if you are unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end of it, it's an easy 22k or like 25k or 30k in some instances when these shells do manage to find the Citadel. Now, the AP is a little weird on the Bungo and on the Japanese battle cruisers. It seems to not really got it at range until you get to the Bungo, but I'm guessing that's just the sheer size of the shell. It's an 18-inch shell. It doesn't have to have terrific AP performance characteristics when you're lobbing an 18-inch shell at something, but with the grind up to the Bungo, it does get a little frustrating with it. But anyway, the Bungo herself, which is what we're talking about, is a great ship. Against cruisers, my god, if you find a cruiser lacking in the Bungo, you have its broadside, there's a very good chance you're going to send it back to port, especially if you have the spotting plane with the enhanced optics up in the air. Now, this is essentially like Deadeye on demand. You hit Y, the plane goes up, you get a 20% reduction to your dispersion, which is amazing when you got 10 18-inch guns. So, yeah, you see a cruiser that's not paying attention, you got its broadside, launch that plane, let your guns rip, you're probably going to remove most of his HP, if not, again, send him back to port. Now, the Bungo is also, you do give up a lot for this, right? It's not that tough of a battleship, and it isn't a battleship slot. First off, it's got about 15,000 less HP than other battleships of its tier. It doesn't have 32 millimeter extremities, so you can get overmatched by, well, a lot of battleships at your tier. It doesn't go 32 knots, only goes 31.5 with the speed flag, so it's a little slow for a battle cruiser, but I mean, hey, when you got 10 18-inch guns with a 26-second reload time, you got to give something up, right? And the guns on this thing are sweet. It's a welcome addition to my fleet, and one, again, I would recommend you guys grind out. And going on down to number 1 is the Tier 10 American battleship, the Montana. You thought I was going to say the Louisiana, huh? No. If, number 5, you get to number 5, you get to North Carolina, keep on going to Tier 10. The Montana is a ship that I didn't even really want that much when I started my grind, which this is the very first battleship I ever grinded out in this game. I should say the very first Tier 10 battleship I ever grinded out in this game, and I didn't really want the Montana. I wanted the Iowa because American, and I think the American battleship line is like the most popular line on the North American server. Big surprise for first time players. It's because most players want the Iowa, right? And by playing the Iowa so much, I eventually got the Montana. I was like, oh, this thing's, it's not the Iowa, it's a fake paper ship, never built. I think like one of the kills got laid down, or they started to lay it down, and then the ships got canceled. But anyway, eventually I got it, and I played it, and my god, this ship holds up so well. This is tied with the Yami for being the oldest battleship in game, as they were the first 2 Tier 10 battleships to be added to the game back when it did release. And it's just, I'm really surprised in a game that is getting pretty close to being 10 years old, this ship still has it. And all the other tech lines that we've talked about, and all these videos I do about this ship and that ship that they got released and they were forgotten about because they got power crept, Montana still hangs today. Because when you have 12 16-inch guns with that super heavy AP we were talking about with the North Carolina, with the nice American battleship dispersion ellipse, with that wonderful horizontal dispersion, I mean, this ship brings a lot of pain to cruiser players and to battleship players that aren't watching their side. Still today, I catch myself losing like a third of my HP to a Montana player that caught me lacking. And yeah, the guns are sweet. The hull is pretty tough. She's actually a surprisingly tough ship. Back in the day, not so much, but they did lower her Citadel and they gave her the improved American battleship heel. So if you need a ship to kind of just, be an annoyance to the enemy team and be a pain to push into, like in clan battles where this ship is still pretty popular at times, she can do it. She can do it pretty darn well. And again, you get those wonderful American 16-inch guns to back you up that are consistent. That's one of the biggest things about the guns, about the ship. Her main battery guns are consistent. That's something that is a major balancing factor when it comes to battleships. You balance the big caliber gun by having, more RNG, lower sigma, lower dispersion rates than cruisers, but with the Montana, especially with the American Plotting Room Mod 2 module equipped, that gives you a 10% buff to your dispersion. Yeah, the shells are going where you generally want them to go, and that is a huge thing to have at your disposal as a battleship player. So she's great for that. A very tough ship, a forgiving ship with that American battleship heel, and a ship that I would highly recommend first-time battleship players to grind up to. The American battleship line in general is a very good trainer line. It teaches you about angling with the North Carolina, teaches you how to lead targets very well thanks to the slow shells, and then you get a nice, good, consistent American battleship at the end with the Montana. So guys, those are my top 5 must-grind ships. Let me know in the comments down below, what would you add to this list? What would you take away? What would be your top 5 must-grind ships? Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday and wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.